Good afternoon, everyone. It being 12 p.m., I am going to call the 7th meeting of the Corporate Services Committee to order. As always, I will begin by acknowledging that the City of London is situated on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Lenape-Pewak, and Attawandaron peoples. We honor and respect the history, languages, and culture of the diverse Indigenous people who call this territory home. The City of London is currently home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people today. And as representatives of the people of the City of London, we are grateful to have the opportunity to work and live in this territory. I will also remind those in attendance and those watching remotely that the City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for meetings upon request. To make a request specific to this meeting, please email csc@london.ca or phone 519-661-2489, extension 2425. And with that, and noting that we do have quorum, and the mayor has joined us, so we have extra quorum today. We will begin with the disclosures of pecuniary interest, looking to committee members for any disclosures. I'm seeing none, so we are going to move on to the consent agenda. I will advise colleagues that I have been asked by staff to pull 2.4 at their request. They would actually like this referred back as there's some housekeeping measures in this report that need to be tidied up before we move forward with that. And I have also pulled 2.9. Colleagues will be aware that I have circulated a motion in advance earlier today with regard to that item. So I'm looking for a mover and a seconder, unless colleagues want anything else pulled separately. For the balance of the consent agenda, that's 2.1 through 2.9, excluding 2.4 and 2.9. So I'm looking for a move by Councillor Stevenson, seconded by Councillor Ferreira. So we'll open the floor now for any discussion on items 2.1 through 2.3 and 2.5 through 2.8.
I'd like to have 2.8 voted on separately.
Okay, we can pull 2.8 as well. So the balance of the agenda then will be 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 2.5, 2.6, and 2.7. Mayor Morgan.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment on the 2.1, which is the year-end operating budget monitoring report. You can see, as per our policy, the surplus will essentially populate a number of funds, including reducing authorized but unissued debt, an injection into the Community Investment Reserve Fund, and an injection into the Capital Gap Reserve Fund. I'm very supportive of these investments. Colleagues will recall in an earlier debate related to putting some money into the Humane Society's project, I suggested that we not use the Community Investment Reserve Fund as the avenue for funding that, and that we use the operating budget contingency reserve in its place. At the time, I indicated that's because I wanted to raise some suggestions on how we could utilize the Community Investment Reserve Fund. I'm not going to do that today. I wanted to wait and see what the balance of the fund would, but it's my anticipation that I would bring forward an item to council for consideration, which I would expect we would debate and consider within the multi-year budget, but I just wanted to give colleagues a heads up that I wasn't going to do that today. It would be related to accelerating our Parks and Rec master plan across the city. It's something that I spoke to Londoners a lot about through last year, and certainly it will be our collective decision, but I did want colleagues to know, since this is the point at which we know that fund is being populated with a portion of the surplus money, that I would intend on having a council debate about how to use that in the proper place at the proper time as part of the multi-year budget. But I'll bring forward a direction before the multi-year budget so colleagues know the direction that I'd be heading. I just wanted to provide that context, and otherwise I think you know, the rest of the reports on the agenda look great.
Thank you, Your Worship. Any other questions or comments on the consent agenda as moved? I see none, so I'll ask the clerk to open the vote on that.
I'll vote yes.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed, 6-0.
Thank you, colleagues. Moving along, item 2.4, the delegation of authority bylaw. This is the one that staff have asked us to actually pull and refer back to them. So certainly we can ask questions if you wish, but I'm looking for a motion to refer this back to a future meeting of Corporate Services Committee. Councillor Trussow, are you moving that?
Yes, and I do have one.
Okay, so we've got a mover in yourself and a seconder in Councillor Stevenson. So now if you have a question, we can entertain that.
My understanding of this is that there are a variety of different bylaws that delegate different activities to staff, and this is supposed to be a comprehensive list of that for each division, and that we'll be getting this from other divisions later?
Ms. Ramalou?
Thank you. Through the chair, this report, when it does come forward for approval, will look to assign or delegate authority for a number of approvals that are not currently delegated through other bylaws and so on, but are of a fairly regular nature or have very few differences or power that the city has to change and so on. So be happy to go through that in great detail, but no, at this time, these are not covered underneath other bylaws. This report is specific to environment and infrastructure type agreements, and we will be following in the future with other service areas and expansion on the bylaw, but this was to get the ball rolling, so to speak.
Councillor Trussow?
Yeah, thank you. My concerns about delegations are not with respect to this service area, so I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, then I will ask the clerk to open the vote on the referral.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed, 6-0.
Thank you, colleagues. Moving on, item 2.8. This is the members of council proof of COVID-19 vaccination policy. The report is before you. Councillor Trussow asked for this to be pulled and voted on separately. In order to start that, I'll be looking for a mover and a seconder on the staff recommendation. Moved by Councillor Stevenson and seconded by Councillor McAllister. Now we'll open the floor for questions and comments. Councillor Trussow?
I just wanted this pulled because I agree that the council policy should be the same as the staff policy, but I am going to vote no on this, and I just want the opportunity to do that. And I'm not going to make a major argument about it. I know where we are on this.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other questions or comments? I see none, so I'll ask the clerk to open the vote on this.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed, 5-1.
Thank you, colleagues. Moving on, item 2.9 is the standing committee meetings and annual meeting calendar. I did indicate at the start of the meeting, I had circulated a motion earlier today. I do apologize for the short notice on that, but I did need to make sure the language was consistent with conversation with the clerk. Now that that's been circulated for people's consideration, I will ask Councillor Trussow as the vice chair to take the chair, and I will put that motion on the floor.
I'm going to probably want to address this too once I figure out what it is, so you might want to ask somebody else. So should I take it now and then pass it to
Well, you can, what would be best is if you took it now as the vice chair, and then if you want to weigh in as well, you can pass the chair back.
Mayor Lewis.
Thank you, Councillor. So, colleagues, the motion that I have circulated before you, and I'll read it out now, and the clerks do have this, that the 2024 Standing Committee meetings and annual meeting calendar report be referred to the Governance Working Group for consideration of moving standing committee meetings to regular City Hall business hours for all standing committee meetings effective December 1st, 2023. And I do believe I have a seconder in Councillor McAllister. And then once you can confirm that, Councillor, then I'll speak to my intent.
Counselor McAllister, did you second that? Thank you. Deputy Mayor Lewis?
Thank you, Presiding Officer Trussow. So colleagues, for those who are new to council, up until this term of council, our formal council meetings didn't begin until 4 p.m., just as we see with planning and SPPC and Community and Protective Services today. However, the transition to daytime meetings has been very smooth. It's been well received by members of our staff. It has not prohibited community members from attending. In fact, we saw at our council meeting last week a number of community members in the gallery. We continue to have other options for community members to engage with us, whether that's joining remotely by Zoom, providing written communication to us. For all of the consternation that was expressed that daytime meetings were going to be a barrier, none of that has proven to be true. But what daytime meetings of council have given us is the ability for councilors, for our staff who have to sit here through our standing committee meetings, sometimes for many hours at a time. Certainly those who have attended the strategic plan meetings have given a lot of their evenings up to be with us here. What it does is gives them their evenings back. It also allows us to have the full weight of civic administration available to us during standing committee and council meetings if we do this, because in the evenings, if somebody's not here, that question has to be referred off. But in the daytime, it only takes a couple of moments to contact the person at their office space and have them join us for a meeting to provide that information. So there's a lot of flexibility and opportunity here. And frankly, and I say this without any intent to be derogatory about things, it's time that London followed other big cities in this province, in this country, and held its meetings during regular daytime hours. That's what big cities do. And we are fast approaching 500,000 people. Should not be expected that Mayor Morgan or Councillor Ferreira has to miss bedtime or Councillor Frank with their little ones at home because a committee meeting is going to run long. If we send this to governance working group, we can look at what those start times might be. I have some opinions myself. I think if we started at 9:30 and 1, we could fit all of our standing committee meetings in during the daytime quite easily. And as I said, there's still ample opportunity for public engagement, participation, and flexibility for our staff as well as for ourselves. So I really encourage colleagues to support this. I think it is time that London as a big city moves towards a big city schedule. And that's my comments on this item.
Could I return the chair to you and I'll ask for the floor?
Yep, and I will recognize Councillor Trussow.
Yeah, I don't see the text of the motion in front of me. So if the text of the motion is merely to refer start times to governance for a determination there, I'm going to support that. But if it also includes a lot of the other comments about how we should be doing this because we're a big city, and I would. That's the point of having the discussion at the governance committee. So I don't want to include commentary in this that is taking a position on it. And I don't see the actual.
It is in your e-scribe, Councillor.
Okay.
And my comments are not part of that. It's simply the motion.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's all I needed to know.
And I'll go to Mayor Morgan next.
Yes, to Councillor Trosau, I would agree with you. I don't think we should make a decision here. That's indeed not what the motion says. It's to refer the discussion to governance working group, which I'm very comfortable with. I think that there will be, as there have been in the past, as this has been discussed, there'll be pros and cons, pro and con points raised on this and the possible changes. I also think that there's, through the governance working group, ideas to find solutions to some of the potential cons, makes adjustments, and allows what is a group of councillors to come together and have a discussion about this and see where we go. I think the governance working group is an appropriate place for this discussion, and I know other members of council who want to provide feedback can certainly come and share those with the group, whether or not they're actually on the group. And a governance working group will refer refers all items back into, if my understanding is correct, SPPC, I think, not back into the standing committee. So ultimately, all members of council will have the ability to make a decision on this. But the clerks can correct me if I'm wrong, if it's referred from Corporate Services Committee, whether it comes back here or whether it goes to SPPC for final decision.
Well, we will seek clarification from the wise clerks on that.
Thank you. Through the chair, the governance working group does report back to council through the Strategic Priorities and Policy Committee. So that's where any recommendation would go unless it was directed otherwise to a different standing committee.
Then again, my comments stand. I think every member of council will have the ability to weigh in on this after governance working group has gone through, had a discussion, and made a recommendation. So it seems like an appropriate way to have a discussion that I know a number of members of councilors would like to have.
Thank you, Mayor Morgan. Councillor Ferreira.
Thank you, and through you. I do appreciate the motion. Evening hours are definitely more of a sacred time, and I have been missing a lot, so just like with that consideration, I do appreciate that. I am concerned about, individuals of the city not necessarily being able to attend some meetings, but I do feel like that's something we can discuss at the governance working group. So those are the type of questions I'd like to raise there, just about the specific hours and just the pros and cons. So the fact that it's going to be referred to there, I would support the motion as it stands right now, so I do appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? I'm seeing shaking heads. I will just conclude, and very briefly from the chair, just for councilors' information. There have been discussions with the clerks, and they have identified 2 possible dates in May for the first meeting of the governance working group, and I'm working with them to get something on SPPC for next week, so that that direction can be given to call the first meeting. So this would be something that we can have a discussion about in May. And with no other speakers on the list, I will ask the clerk to open the vote on this.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 6-0.
Thank you, colleagues. Moving on to item 3, scheduled items. There are none. Item 4 is items for direction. We have 4 applications for issuance of proclamation, and then we have an item with regard to the Board of Directors for the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. So I'm in committee's hands as to whether you wish to deal with the proclamations as a group or individually. But I'll look for some direction. Councillor Trussow.
I have a general question about the forms for proclamations. Is there some minimal standard that we like people to use when they fill out the form, like including their last name and including like contact information and things like that? Because some of these are very well done. I mean, there's a lot of information, and others there's just hardly anything.
Well, that would be a question for the clerks to respond to, so I will look to our clerk for that.
Thank you. Through the chair, there's not a requirement for specific fields to be completed. It's a standard form, and we don't vet the amount of information that's included. You are correct in your observation that some are more comprehensive than others. In some cases, there is some information redacted when it is personal information that's included, as opposed to that of an organization or a business.
Thank you for that, clerk. Councillor Stevenson.
I'm happy to make a motion to do all of the proclamations in one.
Okay, I'm just going to look to see if there's any objection to dealing with 4.1 through 4.4 together. And if there's no objections, do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Ferreira. Any discussion on the 4 applications before us for proclamation? Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say a few words in support of the motion proclaiming May 13th Fallen Dafa Day in the City of London. Fallen Dafa Day pays tribute to the contributions of Falun Dafa, also known as Falun Gong. Members in London, many of whom study at Western University or arrived here as refugees fleeing persecution by the Chinese Communist Party. The Falun Dafa community has enriched London's multicultural landscape immensely, demonstrating their core values of truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. Falun Dafa members within China have faced horrific human rights abuses and crimes against humanity, as highlighted by many Canadian diplomats and political leaders. Former Canadian Justice Minister Irwin Cotler said, "The abhorrent practice of organ harvesting has targeted the most vulnerable, including Falun Gong practitioners in China." Canadian Parliament has even passed legislation prohibiting those involved in this practice from entering Canada with support from all political parties. The Falun Dafa community has been integral in exposing the Chinese Communist regime's atrocities. Here in London, Falun Gong volunteers teach free meditation exercises, helping Canadians of all faiths improve their mental and physical health with the stated goal of building a more healthy and harmonious society. In closing, I hope that we as a council continue to prioritize building a city in which persecuted religious minorities like Falun Dafa can safely and prosperously call it home.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. Any other comments or questions with regard to the proclamations? I see none, so I will ask the clerk to open the vote on that.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed, 6-0.
Thank you, colleagues. Our last item on the public agenda is a communication from Councillor Frank with regard to a vacancy on the Board of Directors for the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and her intent to stand for election to that position. Councillor Frank is with us, so I will invite Councillor Frank to offer a few words on this.
Thank you, and thank you for having me at your committee. I love how efficiently your meetings are run. They're very quick. But I did want to come and speak a little bit about why I'm seeking the position for the Board of Directors. So as some of fellow councillors might know, Mayor Morgan sits on the FCM board, but will be focusing more of his time on, I think he'll probably mention this, on the Ontario Big City Mayors Caucus. So that potentially will leave an opportunity for somebody from the Southwestern Ontario or London area to fill that vacancy. I'm hoping to seek that position. I followed along even before I became a city councillor with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities because they offer a lot of funding opportunities to municipalities, specifically with green building and transportation. So my work in the environmental sector, I was really engaged in the work that they are doing to try and make cities more resilient and green. So I'm hoping that I can seek a position on the board. So there is a bit of an election process that I'm happy to outline, although Mayor Morgan, having gone through it, probably has some better answers for that process. But hoping to seek your support because my understanding is I do need a council resolution to be able to then go on and seek that position on that board. So the letter just outlines the various meetings I need to be attending, including the annual conference that I imagine a variety of us will be attending in Toronto, and reasons why I'm hoping to be able to represent London and Southwestern Ontario, given our unique situation. I'm hoping to be able to continue to advocate at the federal level for various solutions coming our way. So happy to answer any questions, but would love your support on this.
Thank you, Councillor Frank. Mayor Morgan.
Yes, so first off, I'm happy to move the resolution on behalf of Councillor Frank so that we can discuss it on the floor. And I'll add my words of support for us continuing to go for a board seat on the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. For many years, Councillor Usher served as a member of the board of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and then he assisted me in achieving the board seat, which I've sat on for a number of years. I've also chaired one of the major standing committees, I think in 3 years. There's 4 major standing committees of the FCM. Our ability to influence FCM policy is really important, not just for the City of London, but for the region. And often when there are multiple members from the region, we work together in collaboration to represent both urban and rural municipalities from Southwestern Ontario on that board. I think the continuation of a member on that board is important for our continued advocacy at the federal level. I am the current board member, and it's my intent not to seek re-election because I now sit on the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Big City Mayors Caucus. And although you can serve on both, I think it's much more important to have another member of the council's voice there because we can work collaboratively on the FCM through those 2 different parts of the organization on issues for our city and our region. I'll also say, for those who also might be interested in the FCM, after the board elections are over, there's also the ability to serve on committees at the FCM. The committees are made up of both board members and then members from member municipalities across the country. Now is not the time to submit a committee application, but if there are other members of council who are interested in seeking a committee application, that will also be coming up. The final thing I would say is, this is an election. It's an election from elected officials who've already been elected. So many people who run know what they're doing. And if you want Councillor Frank to win, not only does she need our support here and at council to have the resolution in place, but she needs you to attend the Federation of Canadian Municipalities annual conference in Toronto. The advantage is it's not going to be very expensive to get to Toronto for us. And so if we can send a good contingent of council there to support her in the election, even if you can only go down for part of the conference, that will be very critical to her being successful in this endeavor. So I'm happy to answer any questions that colleagues might have about the process, but I will say from my experience, from Councillor Usher's experience, from others, having a seat on this board is important to both our city and the region.
Thank you, Mayor Morgan, and I will share that I've had staff register me for FCM and book my hotel specifically so I can go and support Councillor Frank in her election here. I'm looking for a seconder, seconded by Councillor McAllister. Any other discussion on this item? Seeing none, then I will ask the clerk to open the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 6-0.
Thank you, colleagues. We have no deferred matters or additional business on the agenda. We do have 3 items for which we need to go in camera, so I will look for a motion to move in camera. For the reasons outlined on the public agenda, land disposition, solicitor-client privilege, land acquisition, solicitor-client privilege, and litigation, potential litigation matters before administrative tribunals, solicitor-client privilege. Moved by Councillor Stevenson and seconded by Councillor Ferreira. And I'll ask the clerk to open the vote on that.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 6-0.
And just bear with us for a moment or two, colleagues, while we shuffle the appropriate deck chairs and secure the chambers for in-camera. All right, we are returning to public session for the 7th meeting of the Corporate Services Committee. I will now call on Vice Chair Trussow to report out from our confidential session.
The Corporate Services Committee on April 11th heard 3 matters pertaining to solicitor-client privilege. The first one and the second one were with respect to land dispositions or land acquisitions, matters pertaining to the proposed or pending acquisition of land. The third one was a matter pertaining to litigation with respect to the expropriation of the property at 73 Warncliffe Road South, as more fully laid out in the agenda, and progress was made on all 3 of these.
Thank you, Vice Chair Trussow. And with that, I will look for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Stevenson, Councillor McAllister seconds. By hand, all those in favor?
That motion's passed.
Thank you, everyone. And the good news is if you didn't get enough of committee, Planning and Environment starts at 4 p.m.